Ladies and gentlemen, before the start of deliberations on today's topic, let me have the privilege as the President of NISSMAT to introduce this international institution. Established in 1990, it has now become a think tank organization with association of more than 90 experts and scholars on various subjects who provide inputs to us. Our forum has conducted a number of webinars and interactive sessions which have received massive response. I am sure our session today would be of great interest to you all. Thank you.
Good day to everyone. Welcome to NISSMAT. NISSMAT stands for National Institute for Safety, Security, Management and Applied Technology. We have a very interesting subject today, that is the changing dynamics of the Russian nuclear doctrine. Russia and Ukraine have been in war for the last 3 years. And the changing dynamics of warfare. First, it was conventional use of drones, missiles, air effort. As a result, both the sides have been suffering very heavy casualties. Now, with the US giving a sanction to Ukraine to use long-range missiles, which has been hitting certain targets in Russia, the Russians have changed the nuclear doctrine. For this change, we have Major General Dr. Ashok Kumar, who is going to be dwelling on this subject. General Ashok Kumar has served in all the operational areas. He commanded a unit, he commanded a brigade along the line of actual control with the Chinese. He's a visiting fellow and analyst of the clause. He is a specialist in neighboring countries with special forces on China. He has commanded the infantry brigade with operational responsibility at the LAC on Chinese border. Close to the area of 1962 war commenced, he headed an ex-servicemen's contributory health scheme, that is ECHS, and presently he is the managing director of a strategic group which deals with the operational and strategic aspects. So we can't have a better person than General Ashok Kumar to give us a talk on the changing dynamics of Russian nuclear doctrine. Ashok, request you on, please.
Thank you, sir. It's matter of honor for me to speaking to you all today. I am grateful to NISSMAT in general and General Mehta in particular to give me this opportunity. Before we touch the Russia's changing nuclear doctrine, we need to understand as to how that nuclear warfighting came about since inception, who all have got the legitimate nuclear weapons and in what numbers, who have got the weapons but not recognized as such, and as to how there is increased cyber rattling and likely use of this weapon system, especially since the inception of Russia-Ukraine war. So I shall start so that all kind of listeners can understand the entire dimension.
Okay.
Now, you would be aware that when the Second World War II was on, initially USA was not part of it, really speaking, till the time Pearl Harbor happened and Japan attacked that. Russia was on the side of actually Germans till the time Germans, started going eastwards, and finally a different kind of concoction emerged. The allies were primarily 3 countries, though there were other countries also in support, but they were primarily the Germany, Italy, and Japan. So at the war was waging towards 45, the countries were busy inventing more and more dangerous weapons to close the World War II, as also to register their wins. And USA was the first country which succeeded in developing the nuclear weapons for the first time in the world. However, they had tested that only in the laboratory. The ground testing was not done. So they decided to test it during the World War II on Japan. Frankly speaking, out of these three Axis countries, Italy had surrendered as early as 1943. Even Germany has actually, surrendered in March 45. Japan was the only country which was balanced to surrender. So these weapons were launched on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On Hiroshima on 6 August 1945 and 3 days later on Nagasaki. These two cities in Japan are in the southern part of Japan, separated by close to 400 kilometers. And further south of them, there is a Okinawa Island, which was already captured by USA before these weapons were launched. And the ground forces were already planning to invade Japan from the southern direction. And
Okay.
I'm sure, they would have succeeded in making Japan surrender, but they decided still to launch these weapons. There is a narrative and a strong belief that USA, though it advocates that it launched the nuclear weapons to ensure that Japan capitulates faster and World War II comes to an end closer, but it was actually a run-up to the supremacy which may emerge after 1945 between the USA and the erstwhile USSR. And because of that, these two atomic bombs were dropped, which resulted in some casualties of more than 25 lakh people killed. And the crippling effect of these weapons are still continuing till date. Now, thereafter, after the 45 happened, so USA attained this kind of capacity. So if you remember, the Germany, once it surrendered, there was a rush from the USA as well as from the Soviet Union side to claim the maximum part of Germany, which finally turned out to be West Germany and East Germany. West Germany came under control of the so-called democratic countries, became a democratic country, and East Germany became part of United States of Soviet Union, and they adopted the communism, and then there was a line dividing between the West Germany and the East Germany, and famous Berlin Wall is well known to you. So when these things were happening, Germany was actually leading in technology in a big way in the entire world. The kind of scientists which were there in Germany, they were not elsewhere. And since these kind of things were happening, and so both USA and Soviets, they tried to get maximum of the scientists of Germany back to their countries so that they can work for them. And it is because of this reason that while USA had taken the lead in 1945 to detonate the atomic bomb in lead with Russia, but subsequently Russians went ahead than America in launching the Sputnik. And Russia also caught up with the USA after detonating the atomic bomb, of course, not on any country by itself in 1949, just 4 years later than that. And immediately after that, the UK exploded atomic bomb in 1952. It was followed by France in 1960 and China in 1964. So if you see, all these 5 countries were at some point of time part of the Allied forces and not the Axis forces. The initially, which I told about the Germany, Italy, and Japan, they were actually part of the Axis forces. So thereafter, they went in for a nuclear proliferation treaty, which got ratified in 1970, and only these 5 countries have been recognized as the official entities having the nuclear weapons. And thereafter,
Actually, may
after
I intervene here,
1970,
Ashok?
nobody else has been allowed to join. Then,
Going through this,
sir,
you see, after this strike in Japan, and we found the
sir,
destruction of this nuclear weapons, the weapons of mass destruction, causing God, and especially after this Cuban missile problem which came into being, a large number of treaties were signed
yes, sir,
to avoid a major destruction.
absolutely.
created a lot of confusion. Like the Treaty of Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which prohibits development, testing, production, and use of nuclear weapons. Then the other related aspects are this partial test ban, threshold test ban, and I think one of the two most important treaties which came into being is the first one I mentioned, Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and second one was Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty signed in 1972 between the US and Russia. This was the basic framework to avoid major destruction in the world. What do you have to say for this, sir?
Absolutely, sir. Actually, so I was just going towards that history. In 1945, USA not only tested, they demonstrated the physical use of these atomic weapons, which were so devastating that they changed the entire sight of the world towards the mass of this weapon of mass destruction. And in 49, Russians also achieved the similar capability. And therefore, the Cold War, which started post World War II and continued till 1991, till the time USSR got disintegrated. So during this time, there was always a worry that there may result in a serious confrontation, and other countries may also become nuclear, and they can also have this power of mass destruction. So to checkmate that, both these countries and other concerned countries worked with each other. They came up with the NPT in 1970, then they came with CTBT, then they came with the reduction of missile treaty, because the number of warheads and the missiles between the Warsaw countries led by USSR and the NATO countries led by USA had increased substantially. They were capable of destroying the entire world multiple round of times. So because of these things, there were reduction in the stockpiles. A substantial number of weapons were destroyed, warheads were reduced, and some kind of balance was achieved, which resulted that there were no nuclear confrontations, so to say, which got actualized till 1991. But after 1991 happened, and the Russia became the actually prime successor of USSR, then there were challenges. It was not as strong as was the case of USSR, and then the dynamics has changed thereafter. As of now, as we speak, some of the agreements which had taken place between USA and USSR, they are under the limbo, both from the USA side as well as USSR side. And what is going to happen on those agreements will be more better known once the Trump takes over on 20th of January this month. So going back to the earlier status, after 1970, the NPT was signed. Thereafter, there have been 3 countries which have detonated the atomic weapons. India being one, it did it in 1974 and then again in 1998. Pakistan did it in 1998, and North Korea, though it was a signatory of NPT initially, but it moved out of the NPT in 2003, and it also carried out detonation in 2006. So these 3 countries have the nuclear weapons. The world knows about it, but they are not a signatory of the NPT as of now. Therefore, they don't have that so-called sanctity which is available with the first 5 countries. India, in fact, had developed this capacity, sir, before 1970, and they could have actually become a authorized nuclear status, but for whatever reasons, they finally declared its detonation in 1974 only. And because of cutoff of 1974, since both NPT and CTBT are not treating all the countries at par, and therefore they are according the special status to those 5 countries, and therefore India is not a signatory of NPT and CTBT as of now, as on date. Of course, it largely follows the principles enshrined on its own as far as these treaties are concerned. In addition to these,
Ashok, there are a large number of anomalies in this thing. In spite of so many treaties having been signed, as per the international law, nuclear weapons can be utilized as per the laws of the armed conflict when lawful, including objectives on military targets and personnel, but avoiding environment. You see, there's an anomaly in this various treaties which have taken place.
Absolutely, sir. In fact, whatever we desire, the nature of nuclear weapons is so much large in destruction that it cannot actually be limited only to the military targets alone. And now we are in an era of development that the civil resources, infrastructure, human being, human capital, and military infrastructure, they are intermingled, right up to the border in most of the countries in the world today. There is no exclusive zone where the people can fight and the civilians will not be affected adversely. Though of course we are nowadays talking about the tactical nuclear weapons which may have a limited capacity, but largely the nature of the nuclear weapon is of mass destruction. So even if a legal provision does exist, firstly the countries don't follow. The nuclear weapons are invariably with the powerful countries, and they don't follow the international norm which comes to their use for their this thing, because they are used only for the critical conditions. So coming back to the initial time set, so we had five plus three, and then there are two more. One is Israel. Of course, its status remains unambiguous. It has developed this capability somewhere between 1960 and 1979. Exact days when the number of warheads which has it has is not known. It ranges anything from 90 to 400. Iran also has developed a reasonable quantity of fissile material, but the confirmed information about its warhead is not existing. There was some effort also to cancel this treaty by USA to give them peaceful purpose option, but even that has not come back. So so this is the how historically countries have developed these weapons, and in what condition and how many kind of weapons they have got. Uh, uh, but anyone who is having the weapons, whether there is a international restriction or not, irrespective what kind of philosophy that country advocates, whether it advocates the no first use or doesn't talk about that, or whether it lays down certain conditions to use that, that is, it depends based on its concerned national interest. More on this we shall talk once we come to the exact issue of looking into the Russian nuclear doctrine, which is under change. Now, Russian nuclear doctrine, as I brought out earlier, that they did the first explosion in 1949, 4 years later than the United States of America. But because of the explosion in Japan and the narrative which was built in and the kind of destruction the atomic weapons were causing, they were very keen that they amass this kind of capability. In fact, as on date, the number of nuclear warheads with USSR is more than what is there with USA and all the NATO countries put together. So that is the kind, and that is true also after the all kind of agreements, downsizing and everything which has happened. There were nuclear warheads in Belarus also. They were moved down. They were earlier in Ukraine also. They were moved out to Russia, and numbers were reduced. But even despite all that, as on date, the number of warheads in USSR are far more than what we have in USA and all other NATO countries put together. So in case of Russia, frankly speaking, the doctrine has been evolving and changing based on the perceived security threat. Initially, during the Cold World War between 1945 till 1991, it was more progressive, so to say, that it declared that it will not be doing the first use. It will not strike any other country first, especially when they don't have the nuclear weapons. Despite the fact that the USA and its NATO countries did not have this kind of nuclear doctrine. They don't have the no first use policy, because in fact European countries don't mind this, because when it comes to their survival, then they don't see that what is going to be happening. So they don't follow the no first use policy. And but this policy of Russia was respected in the world, that despite a country having so much of nuclear arsenal, it has declared of no first use. So therefore in 1960s and 70s, Russia gained a lot of respect in large number of those countries which were peace loving, and especially the non-aligned movement countries, including India. That here is a country who is so capable, but still it is not thinking of the first use. It is going to only do it the responding mechanism. However, once it broke up in form of number of countries in 1991, it became relatively weak, frankly speaking, and it feared that the weakness may be exploited by the NATO countries, and therefore this was the first major change when the Russia modified its nuclear doctrine. And those who are monitoring Russia economically also, it had gone weak economically also. Subsequently, of course, with the advent of oil and oil economy, it has grown up like anything as on date. So after breaking it, it changed the doctrine, and it talked up the mutual assured destruction in terms of, because it concentrated not only on the warheads but also on the delivery systems. So any other country in the world, irrespective of the distances involved, if it was to launch a nuclear strike on Russia or anywhere in areas of Russian control, Russia was, demonstrating capability to strike back, and even if somebody does it first, so mutual assured destruction was, possible. And this mutual assured destruction concept and the narrative actually held on, subsequent years also, not too late, though both USSR group and the USA, they were having the proxy wars in number of countries. In fact, there was no place in the world where one was involved and the other was missing. They were there, but both the places. But
You
still,
see,
the
it's,
nuclear was
what I feel is that the Russian doctrine during the Soviet era was no first use. They were very clear, no first use. But now, over a period of time, as you were mentioning, the doctrines have been changing, because at one point in time, the Russians felt that the conventional strength may not be as prudent as what they think it to be. So they were banking the complete structure on nuclear aspects. Is it correct?
Yes, absolutely. The first major change in the Russian nuclear doctrine took place in 1993. And in that, they clearly stated that whenever the Russian Federation security is at stake, they will be launching the nuclear strike. So that
Correct.
was
That's the
a
point.
major first change, and that was actually manifestation, because the country, they had become relatively weaker after the breakdown happened in 2 years back in 1991. Next change, sir, came in 2000, and at this point of time, they expanded the scope when they wanted to use the nuclear weapons. Because in 1993, the major change was related to when the Russian Federation was at stake. But this time in 2000, the changes included that whenever opposing country is going to use any weapon of mass destruction, it is not only the nuclear things on which they will be responding with the nuclear weapons. Any weapons of mass destruction used by the adversary will be responded by the nuclear weapons. This was the first
Right.
subset of that. And another thing which they made a major change, that it was which was 1993 related to the Russian Federation alone. This time they included their allies also. That even if adversaries attack their allies by nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction, even in that case, the Russia will respond with the nuclear weapons. That was the second change which they did in 2000. And as far as Russian Federation is concerned, they said that even if there is a major ground operations are launched against them by the conventional forces, even at that point of time, they retain the option of using the nuclear weapons. That was the third subcomponent of 2000 change.
You see,
And
it got exaggerated. It got exaggerated in 2022 when the Ukrainians launched an offensive into Russia. And it was actually President Putin, mobilized the Russian nuclear forces to combat readiness. And
absolutely, sir. I'll come to that,
yeah,
shortly.
and
So in
they were saying it
2000,
is on self-defense.
Sir. So in 2000, the major changes included, including the weapons of mass destruction against itself as well as its allies. And third change was related to major ground operations against the Russian Federation.
Yeah.
But uh, even at this stage, preemptive use of nuclear weapons was not on the card. That was not part of the nuclear doctrine. That so it was all in terms of responsive reaction, and not that they are contemplating a threat by adversary and then they have the preemptive launch. So preemptive launch was not inserted in 2000. And then thereafter we are going to come to the current situation, which you just highlighted some bit of it, sir. When and that those changes have actually taken place during the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Because you will agree with me, sir, on 22nd February February 2022, when the operations were launched by Russia in Ukraine in the name of special operations. At that point of time, the whole world was contemplating, even Russia was stating that they are going to capitulate Ukraine in 3 days, 7 days, 10 days, 15 days, not more beyond a month. But the fight is still on. Of course, it is true that the Ukraine has got the support of entire NATO countries in terms of weapon, in terms of financing, in terms of Starlink communications and information operations, and a lot of weapons have also come. Now, so this on one hand exposed also Russia's lack of ability to conduct major operations. They also got exposed on number of counts. They have, as on date when we are speaking, they still have the Ukrainian troops in some portion of Kursk occupying that. They have number of cities being targeted by Ukraine's by the drones, by the long-range missiles, which you talked about, sir, in a big way, because that permission has been given by USA to Ukraine to use this long-range weapons also inside the Russian territory, which was not there initially. So the war was, going on in Ukraine, and not much was happening in Russia. But now the dynamics were changing. In fact, in 2022, there were a lot of ups and downs. 23
Yes.
was relatively a stalemate, and then 24 again, once President Trump's election was announced, he said that he is going to stop this war immediately. And therefore, there were two things which were happening, that both the sides were trying to be in advantageous position to each other. And secondly, the Biden administration and Ukrainian power and some of the NATO countries were trying to put the conditions in a manner that it becomes very difficult for Trump to really, close this thing. So while the war started, maybe within a month or so, the Putin traveled to the forward area. He went to Belarus. He inspected the drills and procedures of the nuclear weapons. So from that day onwards, some kind of tactical weapons of nuclears and otherwise rattling is continuing. But then the later changes which were declared, though these were proposed as early as in September 24, but finally they got promulgated in November 24. One was that, in fact, it was approved by President Putin on 19th November 24 to be precise. And incidentally, this was 1000th day of Russia-Ukraine conflict. And predominantly the reason which was given was in response to US giving the long-range missiles and the guns to Ukrainians for use in the Russia. So what are these major changes which have happened? This has, improved its, doctrine, what changes they adopted in 2000. And these include, firstly, the large attacks on Russia, even with conventional missiles, drones, or aircraft, could meet the criteria for nuclear response. So in the process, he has lowered the threshold of using the nuclear weapons.
Yes, that is important.
Would have been seeing, they would have been monitoring. The Kazan is one of the major cities of Russia which got attacked in the, as the 9/11 attack that happened in World Towers in USA. The drones hit those towers in Kazan. And in this, the lowering of threshold has been limited to the conventional forces, to the drones specifically, and to the aircraft and missiles, that anything of this kind. So Russia retains the right to respond with the nuclear weapons. Now, whether a
So
country
in
even
short,
to that
it means
that is
that
a
the Russian army, Russian per se, has putting both greater reliance on the nuclear weapons, including the first strike. Now, you see,
absolutely.
and this is a very major thing which has happened, which is not there earlier. They're prepared to go in for a first strike in case they are threatened, their area is threatened. And now there's another talk which is going on that in case Sweden and Finland become part of NATO, Russians will not be constrained to deploy their nuclear warheads closer to the border and also on the ships in the Baltic. You see, it's getting more and more complex now.
Absolutely. So I will just cover this. Firstly, the changes. Firstly, the large attack in Russia with the commercial weapons, aircraft, missiles, drones, everything happens. Russia is able to respond on that. Secondly, what you rightly brought out, sir, there is a place known as Kaliningrad, part of Russia, which is close to the Finland and Sweden. So once those countries come, so Russia has also stated that they will deploy their nuclear weapons in Kaliningrad also to take care of those kind of threats, and of course the Baltic Sea is on that,
That's
because
right.
the largest effective control on Baltic route is that of Russia only. Now, next thing which they have said, initially they had talked of the allies, but in addition to that, they have specifically included the Belarus this time. That any attack from these conventional and non-conventional weapons on Belarus will also qualify for the nuclear response. And third thing which they had not included in 2000, that was the preemptive option. This time they have said that even if they have a threat of their sovereignty and the territorial integrity getting affected, even in that case they will use the nuclear weapons. Finally, where do they use or don't use, that is a matter of conjecture and will be known in future. But what is obvious, that as per the stated policy of the Russian Federation, the conditions under which they are going to do the nuclear strike are far very many, and they have also included the preemptive option that should they find that something is building up, even if it has not manifested against them or Belarus, even in that case they can undertake these operations. So
You
these
see,
are the
now,
major changes.
Ashok, one report says that Russia has already deployed more than 1,500 warheads onto the missiles and also to the long-range bombers. Now, you see, this is escalation factor. If this is the case, I'm sure the NATO as well as US also will be taking countermeasures. And this is escalation which is taking place in the world on this new nuclear aspect. What do you have to
Absolutely.
say?
In fact, if you really see that there have been certain areas where Russia has also suffered drastically. And despite them having the bombers, the long-range missiles, maximum number of warheads, still somehow they have been been able to keep a control on that kind of physical escalation. Though they have been saying so, and they may do that in due course of time. But as of now, they still probably, in my mind, being one of the superpowers, they still want to remain in some kind of control and not to jump to that. I hope so. But there is no doubt that the escalation matrix has really moved ahead, and it will be an interesting time to see how things mature after the Trump administration takes over on 20th. As a closing statement, sir, I will just state only two things. Firstly, the countries either follow the no first use philosophy, or they don't say anything on that. And
Yep.
that now I will discuss this small little thing in the Indian context. Now, India follows the no first use, China follows the no first use, Pakistan doesn't have the no first use policy. So what happens in case of India and Pakistan conflict? Since India has said that it will be the no first use policy, and therefore if it abides by the principles which is the basis of discussion, so it will not be using its nuclear weapons against Pakistan. And Pakistan already has the nuclear weapons, which he has said
They
that it
also
can.
have. They also have.
So therefore, our because of this no first use policy, our conventional superiority goes for a jump. You know, since Pakistan is not maintaining that kind of policy, we suffer equally with the Chinese comparison. China and we both are no first use. So who gets the advantage? The one which has got the higher quantum of conventional forces, and as
Yep.
on date, that is China. So because of our no first use policy, Pakistan's open policy, and China's no first use policy, we are at a disadvantageous terms on both the counts. Maybe I'm sure the with the country's national interest is concerned, any country can change its policies. But at least one major change I will definitely recommend, that it could be no first use, but against a non-nuclear state. The moment we put in this caveat, then whatever advantage Pakistan is gaining, that will be written off, really speaking. So with that
But
note, sir, this is
as far as we are concerned, of course, what you say is right that Pakistan has claimed that they have, China has claimed, but we always been saying no first strike. But to counter the threat that is emanating, I think we have made it good by a triad, by all the by sea, land, and air, which I do not know if China definitely would be having. I do not know the neighbor on the west would be having that capability of triad what we have. So we have counted to a certain extent, I guess.
Yeah, I absolutely said the India has been the fourth country in the world to have the triad for launching this kind of this thing. But China and Pakistan, they are also moving closer to this. China has already done the trial because they have the capacity to launch through the medium of air, through the land missiles. They have tried it out now on the submarine, the third component of the
Yeah.
trial. And same now, anything which is China is having, it can be deemed to be having with Pakistan. So Pakistan also has got a submarine. So though they have not that kind of authentic triad existing with them as compared to what India could demonstrate. But I think it's matter of little time when though that advantage will also get nullified. So we have to work on the capacity creation in the conventional forces also, and in the nuclear domain also, besides so many other capacities. So that is all I had to share on the Russia's nuclear
Yeah.
doctrine, which is adopting to the changes which are manifesting for furthering its national interests.
Ashok, very nice of you. And just a few words, what I have to say that over a period of time, what you very clearly brought out, there has been large many treaties have been signed, but there has been a change in the doctrine around the world. You take Russia, for example, from no first strike. Now they're coming on to the aspect of yes,
Preemptive strike.
if they are threatened, we will strike.
So,
And there is a definite change in and even this aspect of, this international law of war, the IHL as they call it, the international humanitarian law, it says that the nuclear weapons may be utilized, the conduct of hostilities under law of armed conflict, which is termed as the international humanitarian law, directs towards, I'll read it out, lawful military objectives, that is personnel and military targets, should not have damage to civilians and environment. You see, again, why we're saying anomaly. Some law says use it. Now, I don't know what President Putin, he says you threaten me and I'll hit back. And that was the basic reason why he came into Ukraine. Ukraine wanted to go to NATO. And now with Sweden and Finland also coming part of NATO, I'm sure Russia are going to deploy some nuclear weapons very close to the borders. And it is a wonderful exposition by you. And I hope the world does not come onto the aspect of use of these weapons of mass destruction, is going to annihilate a very large quantity of people.
Absolutely, sir. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk it out on the matters military.
Yeah, yeah. So, but
Thank you,
it's
sir.
evolving, and I think it's more of a deterrent than actual use. But yes, Russia did shake up the world when in February, when the strategic nuclear forces were put on alert.
Yes,
It did shake up the world.
sir.
So it again is deterrent. I hope it remains at that much and nothing beyond that. And
Sir.
Ashok, thank you very much for the exposition that you gave in a very detailed one. Thanks very much. All the
Thank you,
best.
sir. Jai Hind,
Bye
sir.
bye. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks.